In 1904, an American writer named William Sidney Porter, who published under the name O. Henry, sat down to complete a short story collection set in a fictional Central American republic he named Anchuria. He based it on his time in Honduras, where he had fled several years earlier to avoid embezzlement charges in the United States. He gave Anchuria an economy organized entirely around one export. He gave it a government that existed in practice to facilitate that export, and he coined a phrase to describe it. He called it a banana republic. The term was meant to capture something specific, a country whose political sovereignty was more nominal than real, whose economy was a delivery mechanism for a commodity controlled by outside interests, whose government was, in the final analysis, a subdivision of a corporation headquartered somewhere else. O. Henry was describing Honduras, and he was not wrong. Welcome back to Farms and Frontlines, everybody. I'm your host, Max Terzano. I'm joined, as always, by Jessica Rudo.
Hello.
And last episode, we talked about Panama, a republic declared, a treaty signed, a canal zone carved out of a country's center. This episode, we're in Honduras, a different structure. It's not a zone, but a concession. Not a treaty, but a contract. And not a government displaced, but a government captured. Sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, seriously.
We have talked, Jess, you and I, we've talked pretty much the entirety of this while we've been doing this podcast about the United Fruit Company and how we were always going to talk about it.
Yep.
Well, this is the episode that really dives into that.
Yeah, a lot more detail on it.
Mm-hmm. So how did it start? How does Honduras get involved?
The United Fruit Company was formed in 1899 from the merger of two American enterprises, the Boston Fruit Company, which was owned by Andrew Preston, and the banana trading operations of Minor C. Keith, who had built railroads in Costa Rica in exchange for land concessions. Within weeks of the merger, the new company acquired 7 smaller banana trading firms that had been operating in Honduras. It was, from the outset, structured for scale.
The company that emerged from the 1899 merger was not primarily a fruit company. It was a land company, a railroad company, a shipping company, and a telegraph company that happened to sell bananas. Control of the supply chain, from plantation to port to kitchen table, was the source of its power. Marcello Buccelli, Bananas in Business, United Fruit Company in Colombia, 1899 through 2000. New York University Press, 2005.
Honduras at the turn of the century was neither politically stable nor economically diversified. The country's Caribbean north coast, the most agriculturally productive region, was thinly administered and commercially underdeveloped from the perspective of Honduran state institutions. It was exactly the kind of environment in which concessions-based development could take hold pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
The concession model was straightforward. A company would offer to build railroad infrastructure, and in our other episodes, we've talked about like how a foreign business making, or building infrastructure or creating infrastructure sounds really good, but then
Right.
you have to think too, right?
Yeah, we talked about it a lot in Cuba.
It's a foreign government or a foreign company that now owns that infrastructure.
Right. And they're primarily interested in the company's well-being, not that of the country.
Yeah. But these countries are kind of stuck in the middle there because they can't afford to finance these projects on their own, but they know that they need this infrastructure to kind of move forward,
Right. It's like saying like, hey, you've got a ton of oil under your house, but I myself have no way of getting that oil out. So if someone comes in, it's like, I'll get it out and pay you a little bit. Sure.
And I'll build the driveway to get it out of this area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you now can't use that driveway. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's not for you. You drive around.
So a company is offering to build this infrastructure, and really at this time period, it's going to be railroad in exchange for land grants, along with the right of way. The Honduran government got railroad lines it could not afford otherwise. The fruit company got the land the railroad ran through, so really convenient.
Mm-hmm.
And then they used that land to plant bananas on.
Right.
In practice, the model produced railroads that served the fruit companies, not the Honduran national economy. Lines ran from the banana plantations of the north coast to the ports. they did not connect the country's interior to its capital or its major population centers, which is a really important point.
Hmm.
Again, the people really didn't benefit from these railroads as much as the fruit company did.
Right.
Honduras by 1913 had more miles of railroad track per capita than almost any country in Central America, and virtually none of it served Honduran national development.
That's just so wild.
Yeah. And you'll see other countries. I think Mexico is a good example where railroads are built, but they're built from the capital out. Well, I guess that's not the best way of saying it, but they do connect to the capital down to
Right.
out to the coast and other areas of the country, which really helped like for troop movement and people movement. So
Yeah,
you're not seeing that in Honduras.
it's important to remember that.
Yeah.
Rather than building a national rail network, the companies built export corridors. The lines ran from the banana plantations of the north coast to the ports. They did not connect the country's interior to its capital or its major population centers. John Soluri, Banana Cultures, Agriculture, Consumption, and Environmental Change in Honduras and the United States. University of Texas Press, 2005.
The North Coast was divided in practice between three American companies. United Fruit operated through subsidiaries, the Tella Railroad Company, which held concessions in the Aguian and Sula valleys, and the Truxillo Railroad Company on the Caribbean eastern coast. The Vaccaro Brothers Company, later the Standard Fruit Company, concentrated around La Cibla. And the third operation, the Cuyamel Fruit Company, held territory along the Cuyamel River near the Guatemalan border.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Cuyamel was the smallest of the three. It was also for a period the most consequential because of the man who ran it.
The Honduran government ceded to the banana companies 500 hectares per kilometer of the laid railroad, despite there being no guarantee that those railroads would serve the national economy rather than the fruit export corridor. By the late 19th century, United Fruit, Standard Fruit, and Cuyamel dominated the cultivation, harvesting, and exportation of bananas and controlled the road, rail, and port infrastructure of Honduras. Dario A. Iraque, Reinterpreting the Banana Republic, Region and State in Honduras, 1870 through 1972, University of North Carolina Press, 1996.
The guy who runs it, his name is Samuel Zamore. He was born in 1877 in Bessarabia in the Russian Empire as Shmuel Zamore.
That's a name.
He immigrated to the United States at 14. He settled in Selma, Alabama, and entered the banana trade through the side door, buying overripe bananas off the docks of Mobile, fruit that had arrived too soft to sell in the regular market, and moved it locally by rail before it spoiled. So he's doing a super niche market, right? But it's going really well for him.
It's just
By
like
age-
so
Yeah.
he's super young here. This is crazy.
Yeah, he's 14. Yeah. I wonder too if he's by himself, you know what I mean? Like he
Yeah,
immigrated,
yeah.
but I don't know. By age 21, he had saved $100,000.
But that's $100,000 in
Yeah.
like 1900, the year 1900, like from selling bananas.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
crazy.
From selling bananas. And when we look at these things, I just think, we can see how it impacts like local populations, and it's always negative. But there is a side to this where it's like entrepreneurial. And I say that too about like drug cartels and like drug traffickers. Like it's really sad and terrible on like the humanitarian front. But I do give credit that a lot of these are like very entrepreneurial ideas.
Yeah, I mean, like they're terrible, and a lot of the times they like
Yeah.
evolve into just horrific things. But the
That's
original idea is like I see a need that I can fill,
Yeah,
whether it's from doing some shady business or not is
that's right.
beside the point. Like this guy was 14 and he figured out how to make $100,000 in 1900
Yeah.
by the time he
And
turned 21.
And it's, he sees that they're going to get rid of this,
Mhm.
the overripe bananas, and he sees a market that could use them and just connects the two, which is I just give credit to it. So,
Yeah.
anyway, by 1910, he owned 5,000 acres of banana land along the Cuyamel River in Honduras, worked by Jamaican laborers, and was deeply in debt. So,
Oh boy.
bye-bye 100,000. Yeah. He was also about to become the most consequential private actor in Honduran political history.
Secretary of State Philander C. Knox was facilitating negotiations to reschedule Honduras' sovereign debt, which would have placed agents of J.P. Morgan and Company in Honduran customs offices to collect the revenue needed to repay it. Zamora feared new export taxes would eliminate the favorable terms that made his operation viable. He appealed to Knox for relief. Knox turned him away. Rich Cohen, The Fish That Ate the Whale, The Life and Times of America's Banana King, Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, 2012.
In New Orleans, Zamora found Manuel Bonilla, a former president of Honduras who had been ousted in 1907 and was living in exile. Bonilla wanted back in. Zamora needed a government that would leave his concessions alone. The arrangement was, in its structure, uncomplicated. Zamora hired 2 mercenaries. The guy's name is Guy, and he goes by Machine Gun Maloney.
Machine Gun Maloney just sounds like if you had to pull a fake gangster out of your butt.
Yeah, I know.
Machine Gun Maloney.
Yeah.
What's this guy's name? Guy.
Well, listen to the other one. The other guy's name is Lee Christmas. Louisiana-born railroad brakeman who had drifted south to Honduras, joined the military, and became, by reputation, the most effective soldier of fortune in Central America, which means he was killing people for money.
He was a mercenary, yeah.
Yeah. He had previously served as director of the Honduran National Police under Bonilla's earlier presidency. So some random American is showing up.
It's really like the Wild West down there, like just anything, whatever, you know? Yeah. So, like, just to sum that up, we have a Russian-born kid, essentially, from America, former president of Honduras, Machine Gun Maloney and Lee Christmas forming this insane cabal.
Yeah.
Wild.
I know.
Zamora acquired a former United States Navy vessel, the USS Hornet, loaded it with weapons purchased as Army surplus, and arranged passage. Christmas recruited approximately 100 mercenaries in New Orleans. The State Department sent Secret Service agents to the dock to intercept them. The group evaded surveillance and sailed for Honduras on Christmas Eve, 1910. Rich Cohen, The Fish That Ate the Whale.
The first attempt in 1910 failed. The group reorganized. In January 1911, Christmas's forces captured the port of Trujillo and the town of Ironia. The engagement was the Battle of La Cibla on January 25th, 1911. President Davila, with no reliable support, fled. Manuel Bonilla was inaugurated as president of Honduras on February 1st, 1912. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
The new government's first significant acts were commercial. Bonilla awarded Zamora 10,000 hectares, now we switched, of banana land near the north coast, then another 10,000 near the Guatemalan border. He granted Zamora's company the right to import goods duty-free. He authorized Zamora to raise a $500,000 loan in the name of the Honduran government and use the proceeds to repay himself for the cost of the revolution.
Jeez.
The United States government, which had warned Zamora against the coup and dispatched agents to prevent it, recognized the Bonilla government. No charges were filed.
I mean, this whole series of events is just crazy.
That's Central American history. Like, what? That's crazy. Yeah. That's Central American history.
Yeah, that sums it up right there.
How do I not know about that? That's wild. Yeah.
I mean, I get why the U.S. government doesn't want people to really know about this, but it's just like, he tries to form a coup. They learn about it, try to stop him, fail. They go complete the coup, and the American government's like, yeah, all right, we recognize you.
Mm-hmm. Carry on.
Yep. You did it.
What the records show is Knox objected to the plot formally in writing and dispatched Secret Service agents to the New Orleans docks to intercept the group before they could sail. The effort failed. Zamora's party evaded surveillance and departed. The coup succeeded, and within weeks, the United States recognized the Bonilla government.
Yeah.
No charges were filed against Zamora. The State Department that had tried to stop the coup processed the paperwork for the government it produced. That sequence, objection, failure, accommodation, is what the documents show. It is not the same as Washington enabling the coup. It is also not nothing.
Yeah. Like, I just, oh man, that's, if anything, it's like, that's a whole saving face
Yeah.
right there. Like, no, 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 we don't want you to do that. Fingers
Yeah.
crossed. So look, we're even sending people to stop you. Ah, we failed to stop a whole boat from leaving Louisiana.
Whoops.
Crud. Guess we'll sign off on it now.
Knox had warned Zamora explicitly not to proceed and dispatched federal agents to monitor his movements in New Orleans. American warships were present in Honduran waters as the coup unfolded and watched without intervening. President Taft was privately irritated. The operation defied his administration's stated Honduras policy, but neither he nor Knox moved to reverse its outcome. The Manilla government was recognized. The sequence is precise: objection, surveillance, failure to stop, accommodation. It is not evidence of covert U.S. enablement. It is evidence of a government that opposed a private coup, could not prevent it, and then made peace with the result. Lester D. Langley and Thomas Schoonover, the Banana Men, American Mercenaries and Entrepreneurs in Central America, 1880 through 1930. University Press of Kentucky, 1995.
So at this point, history refers to Zamora as the Banana Man. And if you see anything talking about the Banana Man, that's who they're talking about. They're talking about Honduras.
They're not talking about Curious George's man in the yellow hat.
No, maybe he's off of him. That'd be wild.
Based on Schmiel. By 1913, United Fruit had received two major railway and land concessions in Honduras, operated through its subsidiaries, the Tela Railroad Company and the Truxillo Railroad Company. The total concession package amounted to approximately 162,000 hectares of land, of which 71,000 were granted in direct exchange for railroad construction. The remaining land came as bonus concessions, tax exemptions, and port rights. Now, off the top of my head, I don't know the conversion of acre to hectare, but it's a lot. Like, what did we say the other day? 13 acres was like 5
No,
hectares or
1
something?
acre is 0.4 hectares.
1 acre is 0.4 hectares.
Yeah.
Okay. So like half of it, not even half of it, but still a lot of land.
Yeah.
So within the concession zones, the fruit companies operated as something close to autonomous jurisdictions. They housed their employees, ran their own commissaries, maintained private security forces, and administered their own medical facilities. Workers on the company payroll received their wages in company scrip, redeemable at company stores. And we've talked about how that's just a great idea and never goes
Fruit
wrong.
bucks. Yeah.
Yep.
The American Embassy in Honduras wrote in 1916 that the territory controlled by the Cuyamel Fruit Company was a state itself within another state, housing its employees, operating railroads, steamship lines, power plants, and commissaries. The enclave was self-contained by design. Its revenues flowed out through the company's own port facilities on the company's own ships. American Embassy, Honduras, Internal Report, 1916.
The enclave structure had specific consequences for Honduran development. The North Coast banana economy was extraordinarily productive. By 1913, over 90% of Honduras's foreign trade was controlled by American companies. Almost none of that trade created fiscal capacity for the Honduran state. The rail lines that existed served the export corridor, not the national economy. The hospitals and commissaries served company employees, not Honduran citizens.
Right.
Honduras became the paradigmatic banana republic not simply because its economy depended on bananas, but because the structural organization of that economy prevented the banana trade from generating the state capacity or economic diversification that might have supported broader national development. Rather than building a national rail network, the companies built export corridors. Dario A. Araque, Reinterpreting the Banana Republic.
The labor force was correspondingly stratified. Most plantation workers were Honduran, with a significant presence of Jamaican and other Caribbean laborers on the coast. Wages were set by the company, collective bargaining was not permitted, no unions, labor organizing was treated as a threat to order, and in Honduran law of the period had no legal standing. So if you work there, you take what they give you. That's
right.
That's it.
Right.
H.V. Rolston, vice president of Cuyamel Fruit Company, articulated the company's interest in Honduran political stability with unusual candor in a 1920 letter.
We must make a rupture in the fledgling economy of this country to increase its difficulties and facilitate our objectives. We must prolong its tragic, turbulent, and revolutionary life. H.V. Rolston, Vice President, Cuyamel Fruit Company. Internal letter, July 1920.
William Sidney Porter arrived in Honduras in 1896, fleeing an embezzlement indictment in the United States. He spent several months in Puerto Cortes on the Caribbean coast, observing the operations of the banana trade and the political economy it had produced. When he eventually published his collection, Cabbages and Kings, in 1904, he set it in a fictional republic he called Anchuria, organized entirely around banana export. I wonder why he came up with that idea. Crazy.
I know, weird.
The term he coined, Banana Republic, passed into English as a description of a state whose sovereignty is nominal and whose economy serves external commercial interests. He was describing Honduras in 1904, but the term has outlasted the specific circumstances that produced it.
O. Henry coined the term Banana Republic to describe the fictional republic of Anchuria in Cabbages and Kings, stories inspired by his time in Honduras. The phrase captured something specific, not just dependence on a single commodity, but the political subordination of state institutions to the companies that controlled it. It named a structure that 3 American fruit companies had already built: Lester D. Langley, the Banana Wars, United States Intervention in the Caribbean, 1898 through 1934, Roman and Littlefield, 2002.
The broader policy context for U.S. intervention in Honduras was the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, declared in 1904. The corollary asserted the right of the United States to intervene in the affairs of Latin American and Caribbean nations that were unable to pay their international debts, positioning the U.S. as the hemisphere's creditor of last resort, and military intervention as a debt collection mechanism. Under that framework, the United States sent military forces to Honduras in 1903, 1907, 1911, 1912, 1919, 1924, and 1925. The pattern was consistent: actual or anticipated disorder threatening American commercial interests, followed by a naval or Marine Corps presence to, quote, restore order and, quote, protect American lives and property.
What distinguished the Honduras interventions from other Banana War episodes was the directness of the commercial trigger. The presence or interest of the fruit companies preceded the intervention rather than following it. The 1911 landing was to manage the aftermath of a coup that a private citizen had financed against the stated policy of the U.S. State Department. Lester D. Langley, The Banana Wars.
The administration that formalized dollar diplomacy, the Taft administration, 1909 to 1913, described its policy as substituting dollars for bullets. The phrase acknowledged the connection between commercial interest and military capacity that earlier administrations had left implicit. Secretary of State Philander Knox, the same man who had warned Zamora not to launch his coup and then recognized the Bonilla government afterward, was its architect. Dollar diplomacy did not reduce military intervention in Honduras. Between 1909 and 1925, U.S. forces landed in Honduras 5 times.
I think that's really interesting just to highlight, because in sum, you just can't throw money at a problem and think that it will fix it. And we see administrations, in one form or another, try this over and over again.
Yeah.
You know what else I think is interesting? After Taft is when the Fed is created.
So that tracks.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So,
okay, we got to do a little better than that.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just, while you could argue like history doesn't always repeat itself, it's just a different form, we could still learn a lot of lessons from like things that have happened. And we are seeing this time and time again. We're like, this is not how we fix it. So let's learn and move on and try something else.
Right. And try something that might actually work.
Yeah. By mid-century, the structure built between 1899 and 1930 had been substantially consolidated. Cuyamel Fruit Company was sold to United Fruit in 1929 for $31.5 million in stock. The transaction that made Sam Zamora the largest individual shareholder in the company that he fought for decades.
That's crazy.
When United Fruit stock collapsed 90% during the Great Depression, Zamora bought a controlling share and voted out the board.
Oh
He
my
ran,
gosh.
he ran the company until 1951. Honduras, by the early 1950s, had been organized around banana export for half a century. So imagine that. The country is growing, but it is surrounded by this
Yeah.
monoculture,
It's
export. Yeah. The companies own the railroads, the ports, the telegraphs, and the majority of the country's productive agricultural land. The banana workers who made the system run had no legal right to organize collectively, and that changed in 1954. The strike began in April at the dock facilities of the United Fruit Company's Tella Railroad subsidiary in Tella. A dispute over holiday pay that workers argued that they were owed by law. By May 5th, approximately 25,000 United Fruit workers had joined the action. By the end of the month, workers from Standard Fruit, from the mining, textile, tobacco, and beer industries, from the railroads, and from trades across the North Coast had followed. At its peak, an estimated 100,000 workers were participating in the most significant labor action in Honduran history.
The 1954 strike lasted 69 days, and at its peak involved an estimated 100,000 participants across United Fruit, Standard Fruit, and industrial workers in San Pedro Sula. It was resolved in July with workers gaining significant wage increases, and for the first time in Honduran history, formal recognition of the right to organize collectively. Soyapa G. Portillo Vieira, Roots of Resistance, a story of gender, race, and labor on the north coast of Honduras, University of Texas Press, 2021.
The timing of the 1954 strike intersected with the CIA-backed coup against Guatemalan President Jacobo Arbenz, which was executed in June of that same year, using Honduran territory as a staging ground. The Eisenhower administration concern about communist influence in Central America made a prolonged destabilizing labor action in Honduras inconvenient. United Fruit, which had been refusing to negotiate, was encouraged to settle.
An estimated 14,000 United Fruit Company employees in Honduras went out on a general strike on May 5th demanding a 50% wage increase. The strikers were excellently organized, still avoiding violence, but massing in focal spots in the banana-growing area. U.S. State Department cable, May 1954.
it's
Which is
crazy.
interesting, right?
It
Because
really is.
in Guatemala, that's not the case at the
Yeah.
same time. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's wild to me how no matter what president we have, like whether
Mhm.
they're Republican, they're Democrat,
Mhm.
they're general, they're not, they're all down here doing the
Yeah.
same thing. Like
Yeah.
it's just
Mhm.
out of the public eye. They're all like, no, yeah, we're going to keep going on that
Yeah.
trajectory.
And it different in different areas. So how Guatemala was going after something
Yeah.
changed how the U.S. intervened. And again,
Hmm.
think about the role of Edward Bernays.
Hmm.
But then at the very same time, Honduras has a labor strike, and they're like, all right, we can work with this.
Yeah.
So the 1954 strike did not dismantle the enclave economy. The concessions remained, the land remained in company hands, the railroad networks remained oriented toward the export corridor, but it established the legal existence of organized labor in Honduras for the first time. And the banana workers syndicate it produced became a permanent institutional force in Honduran politics. It was the first time in the 55-year history of the banana concession system that workers had successfully compelled a fruit company to negotiate a collective agreement.
Before the strike, calling Honduras an independent and sovereign country was a legal fiction in practice. After it, there existed at least one institutional structure, the Banana Workers Union, that the fruit companies could not simply dissolve. The subsequent decades saw slow, contested expansion of labor rights and eventually the nationalization of some company-held assets in the 1970s. Siyapa G. Portillo Vieira, Roots of Resistance.
The 1954 Honduran general strike is usually told as a labor story. It's also a foreign policy story, one that connects directly to the logic the Roosevelt administration had been building since the early 1930s, and that the Eisenhower administration was, in 1954, simultaneously trying to apply in Guatemala and quietly trying to contain in Honduras. The Good Neighbor policy, declared by Franklin Roosevelt in 1933, was a formal renunciation of the interventionist doctrine that had sent Marines to Honduras 7 times between 1903 and 1925. It promised non-interference in Latin American internal affairs. It did not promise that American commercial interests would stop shaping those affairs. What it changed was the instrument, not gunboats and marines, but diplomacy, trade agreements, and the cultivation of stable governments that would protect American investment without requiring American troops. Pretty interesting because that's what we do today, right?
Yeah.
Like that soft power,
Yep.
that turn from hard power to soft power
Yep.
was really born here
Yeah.
with
No,
this
you're
policy.
100%. And it's interesting to see how what is happening again, what we're seeing play out again, challenging, what was this new system with the good neighbor policy?
Mm-hmm.
Or, I think challenging is the right word I would use right now. And, and it's probably 50-50. Like we're seeing more gunboat diplomacy,
Quite
literally.
literally, yeah. The 1954 Honduran strike in this context was both a test of the new policy and a complication for it, kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah.
The strike began in April at the United Fruit Company's Teller Railroad docks, a dispute over holiday pay, and within weeks had grown into the largest labor action in Honduran history, involving an estimated 100,000 workers across banana, mining, textile, and railroad industries. United Fruit refused to negotiate. The Eisenhower administration was watching closely because it couldn't send Marines, and
Yeah.
past it would have just had another Marine Corps landing, right? Like, this is ridiculous. Stop it.
Yeah.
The administration's concern was not primarily about the workers. I would say, obviously, right? Like,
Yeah. Sure.
it was about timing. In June 1954, while the strike was still going on, the CIA was executing Operation PB Success, the covert coup against Guatemalan President Jacobo Arbenz, using Honduran territory as its primary staging ground. A prolonged, destabilizing labor crisis in Honduras was at that moment operationally inconvenient. The State Department encouraged United Fruit to settle. United Fruit settled.
Government and private sector overlapping. Because remember, well, I don't know if we said it in this episode, but we have talked about United Fruit previously, but
Yeah.
the board of United Fruit is like 80% U.S. government officials.
Yes. Yep. We talked about it in the episode This is Bananas, our
Yeah.
introductory to this.
Yeah.
I also want to say it's kind of hilarious that the Eisenhower administration is like, we're not intervening because of the good neighbor policy.
Right.
But if you could hurry it up, we're trying to overthrow the government next door.
We have a covert operation happening,
Yeah.
so
Like,
you're kind of screwing
guys.
us up.
It's like, did you not just hear the name of the policy you just mentioned?
Wait, you're being a very bad neighbor.
Yeah, time out, guys. Hold on.
Guatemala.
Yeah, like, I just think it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, the settlement gave Honduran workers wage increases, and for the first time in the history of the banana concession system, formal legal recognition of the right to organize collectively. Again, hell yeah. The Banana Workers Syndicate that emerged from the strike became a permanent institutional force in Honduran politics, the first institution in the country that the fruit companies could not dissolve by calling their lawyers or their government contacts. That's huge.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not the final nail in the coffin for the concession system, but it starts the process.
Yeah. It's
right,
a huge step
over
forward.
The decades that come.
Mm-hmm.
The good neighbor policy had promised non-interference. What the 1954 settlement produced was something the policy had not anticipated: a Honduran civil society institution with enough leverage to complicate the enclave economy from the inside. The United States had encouraged the settlement to protect its Guatemala operation. What it got as a side effect was the first genuine constraint on the United Fruit's power in Honduras that had not come from a foreign government or a Marine Corps landing.
Which is really neat to look at, right?
It is. This is the point where Hondurans actually started to be like, wait, we can do things for ourselves.
And there's quite a bit of that.
It hasn't been that way.
If you're looking at Central and South American history, like that's how it has to happen. It's, the working class or the poorest poor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not equating the two. I'm just saying, like, it's whatever has like the largest amount of people in that class system, they're usually being oppressed in some way, and they kind of rally and they use their numbers to go forth and like make a change.
Right.
And sometimes it's a bloody revolution, and sometimes it's a nice civil political system that comes out of it.
A banana union.
Yeah.
That's what the best you could hope for, but people overpower. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So the connection between the strike and the good neighbor policy is not that one caused the other, it's that both were products of the same underlying recognition. That the intervention model, the Marines, the concessions, the fruit companies as autonomous jurisdictions, had generated more instability than it had resolved. The policy said, we will stop sending troops. The strike said, and we will build something you can't dismantle. Both of those turned out to be, in different ways, true. The fact that organized labor was kind of the tipping point, I just think is super fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially because in the US, like the fight against organized labor was pretty intense.
Oh, yeah. Think about the mobs and
Yeah,
oh, yeah, huge.
the Pinkertons, like all of
Yeah.
that. Like
hmm
it was not a pleasant time for the working class in our history, but great things came out of it. But then the US was like, no, 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 just give the working class what they want. We need to overthrow
Yeah.
this communist.
So I don't know. I'd have to look at like where we were at in the 50s with unions.
Hmm.
But when we talked about Hershey and the Hershey
Hmm.
Company, there's a
Yeah.
strike there.
Yep.
Big angry mob tried to
Yep.
burn the place down. Yeah, because they didn't care about the people. So they're like, do
Right.
whatever, give them whatever they want. Who cares? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever. Which is surprising to me that it wasn't like it was give them whatever they want and not
Mhm.
squash this.
Yeah.
We have something to do.
I guess, yeah. I mean, it is interesting, right? The
Yeah.
other thing I think is interesting, the point that you wrote there, sending troops, sometimes in today's world, we're like, well, just send the troops in. Like, but if we look at history, you can see that sometimes that's not the best approach. It can
Right.
be more disruptive than, the initial contact.
Hmm. No, I agree. Speaking of Guatemala, and we talked about this one gentleman quite a few times
hmm
before we started our series here. So if you haven't listened to our 2 episodes on Edward Bernays, uh, definitely do that because he's a really, really interesting character.
Yeah.
But he did have a role to play here, and we're going to talk about him because he does tie in with Sam the Banana Man,
The Banana Man, that's right.
which is wild.
Yep. So as a small recap, the early 1950s, Sam Zamora is running the United Fruit. I think he's like co-president. He's like vice president.
Hmm.
He's a part of it, right? He's not the overall owner. He's doing that for more than 2 decades at that point. He's bought overripe bananas off the docks in Mobile at 14. He financed a coup at 33. He bought a controlling stake in United Fruit during the Depression and ran the company until 1951. He understood better than almost anybody alive how the business worked. He
Hmm.
also understood in the early 50s that it was in trouble.
My bananas.
I know. The trouble had a name. Arbenz. Jacobo Arbenz was
Hmm.
elected the president of Guatemala in 1950 on a platform that included land reform. So those were like the super bad words for the banana man.
Right.
Yeah, he wanted to redistribute the uncultivated land that was held by large landowners. So United Fruit would, turn over its fields, like they weren't using all the land that they owned all the time.
Right. And this is important because they didn't just own land in Honduras.
Right. They own land all over the place, right?
Hmm.
Honduras, Guatemala, all over Central America. But in Guatemala, Arbenz wanted to change that up because the people working the land owned almost little to none of that land.
Right.
So he wanted to fix that. United Fruit held approximately 550,000 acres in Guatemala.
Crazy.
Most of it was uncultivated. So Arbenz passes a Decree 900, and that said that Guatemala's agrarian reform was basically the government began to expropriate United Fruit's unused land, offering compensation based on the land's declared tax value. For years and years, United Fruit had said that the land was worth way, way less, so that they paid less taxes on it. So, as an example, they would, let's just say, an acre of land in Guatemala was worth $100. United Fruit was saying it was worth one.
Yeah.
Super undervalued the land price
I
just so that
love
they could
that
get
for
it,
them.
just so that they get a tax break all those years. So based on the tax value that United Fruit declared itself, Guatemala bought the land back. So they're like, here's $5. I'm taking these 5 acres. And
Yeah.
United Fruit was like, what?
No.
No, this is worth way more.
And then they had the audacity to like complain about it.
Yeah, that's right. Um, yeah, but it was their own fault. So obviously, United Fruit didn't like that a whole lot, and they were calling it theft. So Zamura's response was not to negotiate. And do you know who he hired? He hired Edward Bernays, which is a great little like we put the two things together for us.
I wonder
Edward Bern
how he like knew him, you know? I'm like, how does a guy running a banana kingdom in Central America know the king of propaganda?
Well, why do you think? I mean, do you think businessmen in general were like, wow, look what
This
that
is the
guy just
guy.
did? Yeah.
Yeah, look what he did for bacon and
Cigarettes, yeah, and
cigarettes. Yeah,
bacon,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. They're like, whoa. But the other thing, like a lot of business people would, I think in the 50s, I could say businessmen
Yeah.
would have known about Bernays. He is like behind a lot of things. So one of the things was the color green and associating it with money.
Hmm.
That's Bernays. Bernays worked really hard to associate the color green with money because one of the cigarette companies that he was working for had super low sales and they did not want to change the packaging color. And he was like, okay, then I gotta change what people think about what they see when they look at your package.
That's crazy.
Right? So it's like, yeah, all that stuff is just wild. Anyway, quick recap on Bernays. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the author of a book called Propaganda. He is the one that coins the term public relations, in which he wrote a book on, and then used that book to get himself a professorship, citing himself the master of the field because he created it.
He is like the slimiest genius that ever lived.
I mean, but
It's crazy.
yeah, it like boggles my mind. It's like, holy moly, this guy is
Seriously.
wild. Talked about how Americans eat bacon with their eggs in the morning. That's
Hmm.
because of him. He was, hired by a pork producer, rebranded cigarettes as torches of freedom. He sells them to sell them to women because at the time it was very taboo for women to smoke in public. He's also advising governments on how to shape public perception. And that is the key, right? How do we look at this problem and make it in our favor? He was 79 years old when Zamora called him and he took the job.
Bernays understood that United Fruit's problem in Guatemala was not a military problem or a legal problem. It was a perception problem. The company needed the American government and the American public to understand Guatemala's land reform not as a domestic policy dispute, but as a communist threat. If Guatemala was communist, the Cold War logic of the Eisenhower administration would do the rest. Bernays' job was to make that framing stick. Larry Tye, the father of spin, Edward L. Bernays and the birth of public relations. Crown Publishers, 1998.
What Bernays built was not a press campaign. Again, he is just a thinking outside the box, coming at things from a different angle. It was an information architecture. He invited American journalists on all expense paid trips to Guatemala. He provided them with briefing materials, access to United Fruit executives, and sympathetic Guatemalan officials, which is also key,
Mhm.
and a ready-made narrative. Guatemala was going communist, and Arbenz government was a Soviet beachhead in the Western Hemisphere, so playing on public fears. And the
Right.
land reform was not agrarian policy, but expropriation in service of Moscow. So it's communism.
That's wild.
Yeah. He created the Middle America Information Bureau, a nominally independent organization that produced and distributed news content about Guatemala to American newspapers. Most of the papers that ran the content did not know it originated with United Fruit's public relations operation. Journalists, man.
Yeah, right. You got to
Newspapers,
dig deeper.
media.
Come on, guys.
The journalists who made the trips often did not know their access was curated. Like, how did they not know?
Right. Ah, Edward Bernays, Mr. Trustworthy, is showing
Yeah.
me Guatemala.
I don't know. But I don't know. Who knows? The State Department officials who cited the Guatemalan communist threat in internal memos were reading, in some cases, material that Bernays had seeded into the press weeks earlier. The guy's a genius. I just
Yeah,
wish he worked for good.
I know, right? Like, imagine what he could have done.
Yeah.
Do we have his brain somewhere? Are we studying it?
I know, right?
Bernays' Guatemala campaign was one of the most effective corporate propaganda operations in American history, not because it fabricated events, but because it shaped the frame through which real events were understood. The land reform was real. The expropriations were real. The Communist Party of Guatemala was real. though small and not in control of the Arbenz government. Bernays did not invent these facts. He arranged them into a narrative that made a CIA-backed coup look like a necessary response to a Soviet threat rather than a commercial intervention on behalf of a fruit company. Stephen Schlesinger and Stephen Kinzer, Bitter Fruit, The Story of the American Coup in Guatemala. Harvard University Press, 1999.
The coup, Operation PB Success, was executed in June of 1954. Arbenz resigned under pressure of a CIA-organized military force and the psychological pressure of a disinformation campaign that, among other things, broadcasted false reports of a large rebel army advancing on the capital. Classic. That's a classic technique.
Yep, can't be falling for that stuff, bud.
You're kind of in a catch-22 there. Hindsight is 50-50 because now we know the army was small. The broadcast was the Operation Arbenz fled into exile. The land reform was reversed, and United Fruit's expropriated land came back. They got it all back. Zamora did not live to see the full consequences. Of course he didn't. He died in 1961. By then, the Guatemala coup had produced the cycle of instability and military rule that would define Guatemalan politics for decades, like until the 90s. The land reform that Bernays had helped brand as communism was replaced by the same concentration of agrarian land that had preceded it. The guerrilla insurgencies that followed the coup lasted 36 years, like I just said, and killed an estimated 200,000 people. It's now considered a genocide.
The connection between the Bernays campaign and Operations PB Success is not that propaganda caused the coup. The Eisenhower administration had its own Cold War logic, and the CIA had been planning a Guatemalan operation before Bernays began his press campaign. What Bernays did was make the coup politically viable, ensure that when it happened, the American public and the American press had a ready-made frame for understanding it as anti-communism rather than a commercial intervention. He made the cover story credible in advance. Larry Ty, The Father of Spin.
Bernays, in his memoirs, expressed some ambivalence about the Guatemala work. He noted that he had not been fully informed about the CIA's involvement. He also noted that the campaign had worked exactly as designed. Both things appear to be true. And if you look at any of his later interviews, he says flat out, I had a job to do and I completed my job. And that's what I looked at.
You hired me to do X, I did X. Done.
And whatever happens after X, that's somebody else's problem.
Yeah, it's not like washing my hands of it.
Oh, it's wild, isn't it?
It really is. The United Fruit Company eventually became United Brands in 1970. In 1975, the company's chief executive died by suicide after it was revealed that he had paid $1.25 million in bribes to the president of Honduras in exchange for a reduction in banana export taxes. Taxes that Honduras had imposed as part of an attempt by Central American governments to reclaim some share of the banana trade's revenues.
So, can I interject?
Yes.
This died by suicide is he either threw himself out of a window, but somehow he flew out of a window, from super high up.
The Russian way.
So there's some little question mark about the die by suicide part.
Right. I thought you were going to say like he ate far too many bananas or something.
You know, if you eat too many bananas, it's actually radioactive.
See? There you go.
He ate 100 and something. I think it's like 130 or 170. It reaches like the radioactive level.
Marvel Comics, if you're listening, give us a call. We've got an idea for Banana Man.
A better one, not the villain. Oh, maybe
maybe it is the villain. Yeah, he could be a bad guy. We're open to talk. Contact us. All right, so the scandal was called Bananagate. Now, here's where it gets fun. United Brands eventually became Chiquita Brands International, which remains one of the largest banana distributors in the world. In 1975, the Honduran government canceled some of the long-standing concessions and began nationalizing infrastructure the companies had controlled for decades. The process was partial, contested, and slow. The land concentrated in company hands during the concession era did not return to Honduran control in full. The structural inequality documented in the 1952 Honduran agrarian census, in which 4.2% of landowners held 56.8% of arable land, had roots in the concession system of the banana era. So the patterns established across episodes 1, 2, and 3, where we talked about Cuba, Panama, and now Honduras, is the same pattern, just differently expressed in each case. Sovereignty formally recognized, but functionally conditioned. Economic infrastructure concentrated in external hands, military capacity available to maintain the arrangements when they were challenged. Cuba had a constitutional clause forcefully inserted. Panama had a canal zone with a fence around it. Honduras had a concession system without a fence, but with the same operational effect. There was largely nothing they could do.
Yeah.
So that is Honduras, and that's going to do it for this episode of Farms and Frontlines. The next episode, we're going to go to Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Now, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, we talked about Haiti quite in depth. But we talked more just about their history, and we talked a little bit about some specific Marine Corps landings. But we're going to look at it and the Dominican Republic in terms of kind of American imperialism and the Monroe Doctrine and the Roosevelt Corollary. And eventually, the U.S. Senate gets involved and takes a closer look to see, what's going on. I want to say this is kind of a turning point in the whole Caribbean era down here. And Guatemala, obviously, is a very important part for the Banana Wars because the repercussions of all of these activities lasted for up until even recently. It's still kind of going on. So that's where we'll capstone. So our next episodes will be Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Then we'll go to Nicaragua, and then we'll finish off in Guatemala. So all of our sources are linked in the show notes. If you want a full written recap with citations, head over to our newsletter at farmsandfrontlines.substack.com. You don't need a subscription to read it, but if you do want to get it in your email inbox, go ahead and sign up. If this episode was interesting, go ahead and share it with someone who you think would like it. The whole series, preferably. Would love that. And rate us on wherever you listen to your podcast. It'd be awesome. We do have more followers now. So thank you all for following, because I got a big laugh last time. I encouraged people to do it. We get one less follower. So I think that's pretty hilarious. But if you do have any thoughts, tips, questions, whatever, you can reach us at farmsandfrontlines@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Talk to you later.